There is a particular kind of discomfort that arrives not from scarcity, but from fullness. Not from having too little, but from suddenly becoming aware of how much you actually contain. You have been walking around in your life, navigating the ordinary mechanics of your days, and then something shifts in the sky, and the interior landscape you thought you knew reveals that it is larger than you believed. Rooms you forgot existed swing open, hallways extend further than you ever walked. And the person standing in the middle of all of that space is you, slightly startled, trying to figure out whether the expansion feels like possibility or like exposure. That is the energy of April 5th, 2026. Not a crisis, not a catastrophe, not a slow dissolve or a seismic rupture. Something different and in some ways more disorienting than either of those things. Today, the Sun at 15 degrees of Aries forms an exact square to Jupiter at 15 degrees of Cancer. And when the planet of conscious identity and will comes into direct tension with the planet of expansion, philosophy, and the scale of what you believe you deserve, everything that has been living quietly at a manageable size inside of you stops being manageable. It simply becomes too large for the container you have been keeping it in. You are not imagining that things feel amplified today. You are not overreacting. You are not being dramatic or oversensitive or out of proportion. You are living inside a sky that is pulling every feeling, every desire, every quietly suppressed ambition, and carefully contained longing out of the comfortable darkness where you have stored it, and placing it directly under full Aries sunlight. And the first reaction to that kind of exposure is almost always some version of this is too much. This is too big. I'm not sure I know how to hold this. The invitation of today is not to shrink it back down. It is to learn that you are capable of containing more than you have allowed yourself to believe. Your birth chart is the map your soul chose before this lifetime began. A personal reading built from the exact moment and place of your birth decodes your sun, moon, and rising with real precision. It reveals your soul's focus area in love, career, or spiritual path. It surfaces hidden karmic patterns and recurring cycles. It delivers a month-by-month forecast for 2026 mapped directly to your natal chart. And it closes with a personal transmission about what your soul is ready for now. Delivered as an audio reading and a PDF report to your inbox within 48 hours. The link is below. To understand what is happening on April 5th, you need to understand the specific geometry of the sky, because today's energy is not emerging from a single planet or a single event. It is emerging from the precise angle between two of the most powerful forces in astrology, and that angle has a particular character that sets it apart from everything else this week is offering. The Sun is currently moving through Aries. Aries is the first sign of the zodiac, and the Sun here is not subtle. Aries is the energy of pure, undiluted self. The part of you that existed before you learned to moderate, before you understood social consequence, before you developed the sophisticated apparatus of self-editing that most adults operate through without even realizing it. The Sun in Aries is the part of you that knows what it wants before the mind has time to talk it out of the wanting. It is impulse and courage and the particular kind of clarity that arrives when you stop weighing every option and simply feel what is true. Saturn is also in Aries, and while Saturn is not the headline of today's story, its proximity to the Sun adds a layer of weight and seriousness to everything the Sun illuminates. This is not a frivolous fire. This is a deliberate one. The Sun in Aries with Saturn nearby is not simply declaring what it wants. It is asking whether what it wants is real and whether it is willing to pay the cost of pursuing it honestly. Now Jupiter. Jupiter sits at 15 degrees of Cancer, which is the exact degree where the Sun's square completes. Cancer is the sign of home, of emotional truth, of the deep interior world of feeling that most people build elaborate architectural structures to protect from public view. Jupiter in Cancer is one of the most emotionally generous and simultaneously most emotionally demanding placements in the zodiac. Jupiter expands whatever it touches. In Cancer, it expands the emotional world. It expands the need for belonging, for care, for the particular intimacy that comes from being genuinely known rather than simply recognized. It expands the longing for home in the most comprehensive sense of that word, not the address, the feeling. When the Sun in Aries forms a square to Jupiter in Cancer, these two forces enter a dynamic tension. The Sun's drive toward individual expression and forward action meets Jupiter's pull toward emotional depth, home, and rootedness. The square is not a soft aspect. It does not blend or flow. It creates friction, a productive clash between two legitimate but temporarily incompatible impulses. The part of you that wants to move forward meets the part of you that wants to make sure you are building on ground that actually holds. The part of you that is ready to act meets the part of you that has things to feel before it can act well. This is why today feels large. It is large. You are navigating the tension between who you are becoming and what you are not yet willing to leave behind. Between the ambition that wants to step out into the world and the emotional truth that says, not yet, not until you have been honest with yourself about what this expansion is actually for. Jupiter is also still in the final months of its transit through Cancer, which it has occupied since the middle of last year. This is a closing chapter. Jupiter is completing something emotionally for each of us, filling in a gap, bringing to fullness a capacity for feeling that had been diminished or suppressed or simply underdeveloped. The square to the Sun today is not just about a single day. It is about the culminating pressure of this entire Jupiter in Cancer cycle pressing against the urgent forward motion of Aries season. Everything that Jupiter has been expanding in you emotionally over the past many months is now in direct conversation with where the Sun is trying to take you, and that conversation cannot be rushed. Venus is moving through the late degrees of Aries, carrying its own urgency and fire. It will not reach Taurus for another 2 weeks. Until then, the desire for what we love and what we value still has the quality of pursuit rather than reception. There is a reaching quality to the emotional field right now that the Sun square Jupiter amplifies. You are reaching for something, towards something, and today the sky is asking you to examine whether the direction of that reaching is actually aligned with what you most deeply want, or whether it is aligned with what you have been conditioned to want, which are sometimes very different destinations. Mars remains in the late degrees of Pisces, approaching its move into Aries in the coming days. Mars in Pisces is not a planet that charges. It is a planet that drifts toward what it is drawn to, pulled by intuitive current rather than strategic decision. Today Mars adds a dreamy, slightly dissolving undertone to the overall energy. The drive is present, but its direction is not yet fully crystallized. Something is gathering. Something is forming beneath the surface of conscious intention. And the square between Sun and Jupiter is the pressure that begins to bring that something up toward definition. Mercury is at 11 degrees of Pisces. Mercury in Pisces does not traffic in linear logic. It processes through association, through image, through the kind of knowing that arrives in dreams or in the quiet after a conversation ends. What you understand today, you may not be able to explain today, but the understanding is real. Give it time. Let it surface in its own language before you try to translate it into something rational. The North Node remains in Pisces, pointing the collective toward surrender, toward spiritual trust, toward the wisdom of releasing control over outcomes and learning to move with what is being revealed rather than what was planned. Every planet in Pisces right now, Mercury and Mars both, is aligned with this nodal direction. The cosmos is asking for a particular kind of courage today, the kind that moves not from certainty, but from faith. And Saturn's sextile Pluto, which became exact in late March, still holds its influence through the coming days. This is the structural backdrop of the entire season, the understanding that what has been dismantled is not lost, but is now raw material for something that can be built with more integrity and more genuine alignment than what came before. This is the full architecture of today's sky. Not a simple single transit, but a layered conversation between multiple forces, all of which are asking some version of the same question. How large are you willing to be? And what would it mean for your life if you actually answered that honestly? The square is one of the most misunderstood aspects in astrology. Popular descriptions tend to frame it as difficulty, as obstacle, as something to be endured or survived. And there is truth in that framing, at least on the surface. Squares create tension. They create the kind of internal friction that makes sitting still uncomfortable and forces movement even when movement was not in the original plan. But the deeper truth about squares is that they are the aspects of growth. They are not the flowing ease of trines, which can sometimes lull you into comfortable stasis. They are not the direct confrontations of oppositions which ask you to choose a side. They are the aspects of dynamic development, the planetary geometry that produces momentum precisely because it will not allow you to stay where you are. The Sun squared Jupiter is, in its most fundamental nature, a confrontation between the actual self and the idea of what the self is capable of. The Sun is who you are. Jupiter is the principle of more, of expansion, of the belief that what is possible extends beyond what has been experienced. When these two bodies form a square, the question that rises is not a gentle philosophical inquiry. It is a direct challenge. Are you living as large as you actually are? Or have you shrunk yourself to a size that feels manageable, that does not risk too much, that keeps the peace by staying small? Jupiter in Cancer gives this question its specific emotional texture. The challenge is not about external achievement or social recognition or the accumulation of credentials. It is about the emotional and domestic and deeply interior dimensions of your life. Are you allowing yourself to feel as much as you are capable of feeling? Are you creating the conditions for genuine belonging, for a home in the most comprehensive sense, for the kind of emotional intimacy that Jupiter in Cancer recognizes as its true territory? Or have you settled for a version of these things that is safe but hollow, that checks the boxes without actually nourishing the soul? The friction of the square today is the friction between the ambition of the Sun in Aries, the part of you that wants to step forward, declare itself, take up space, and move with confidence toward what it wants, and the emotional reality that Jupiter in Cancer will not let you ignore. You cannot move authentically forward while leaving your emotional truth behind. The square is the tension of that impossibility pressing itself into your awareness. This is why today nothing feels small. Every feeling has more weight than usual. Every desire feels more urgent. Every dissatisfaction feels more pressing. Every joy feels more vivid. Jupiter is not causing you to exaggerate. Jupiter is removing the dampening mechanism you have been using to keep experience at a tolerable volume. And without that mechanism, everything arrives at full amplitude. The discomfort in that is real. It is also, if you are willing to sit with it rather than immediately move to reduce it, one of the most accurate readings of your own inner life that you are going to get. What feels too large to contain today is telling you something precise about what you have been containing that should not have been contained in the first place. Jupiter has been in Cancer for nearly a year at this point, and the work it has been doing in each of us is the work of emotional expansion. For some, this has looked like a deepening of important relationships, a growing capacity for intimacy and vulnerability that did not exist before. For others, it has looked like a painful recognition that the emotional containers they have been living inside, the family structures, the friendships, the domestic arrangements, the inner narratives about what kind of love they deserve, have become too small. Jupiter in Cancer does not expand quietly, it expands by making what is insufficient feel unbearable, by making the places where you have been settling for less feel so uncomfortable that staying in them stops being an option. Jupiter is the planet of philosophy and belief, and in Cancer, the beliefs it challenges are the deepest and most personal ones. The belief that you are not the kind of person who gets to have more. The belief that the emotional depth you long for is an unrealistic expectation. The belief that what you have is what you deserve, even when what you have is clearly not what you need. The square to the Sun on April 5th brings all of this to a point of particular clarity and particular pressure. Aries does not tolerate ambiguity. The Sun in Aries wants to know what the situation actually is, what is true and what is not, what is worth moving toward and what needs to be left behind. And when the Sun in Aries squares Jupiter in Cancer, it is essentially demanding an honest accounting of the emotional territory. Where have you been telling yourself that a particular emotional situation is fine when it is not? Where have you been accepting less than you need in the arena of belonging, of care, of being genuinely known and genuinely home? Where has the story you tell about your emotional life diverged from the experience you are actually having? Jupiter will not let these questions stay abstract today. The Sun's fire burns them into the immediate and the personal. There is also the dimension of overflow that the Sun squared Jupiter activates. Jupiter in Cancer is a generous placement, and part of what it has been building in many people over this past year is an expanded capacity for care, for giving, for nurturing, for being the emotional support that others rely on. And that expansion of giving is genuinely beautiful. But Jupiter square to the Sun asks whether the giving has been balanced by receiving, whether the expansion of care that Cancer instills has been directed outward only, leaving the self undernourished in the very areas where nourishment was being freely given to everyone else. This is a common pattern with Cancer placements, and Jupiter amplifies patterns. The one who creates the home for everyone else often forgets that they are also someone who needs a home. The one who tends to emotional needs all around them often has unattended emotional needs, quietly accumulating at the center of their own life. The Sun in Aries, which is nothing if not honest about individual needs, is bringing that imbalance into the light today. It is saying, you also deserve what you have been giving. You also have the right to need what you have been providing. And the discomfort you feel right now is the discomfort of that recognition arriving at a volume you can no longer manage down. Jupiter in Cancer has one more message embedded in today's square, and it is perhaps the most important one. The question of enough. Jupiter is the planet that always wants more, that pushes beyond the horizon, that cannot resist the next expansion. In the sign of Cancer, that more is not material or social. It is emotional. It is interior. It is the question of whether you have allowed yourself enough. Enough feeling, enough warmth, enough rest, enough genuine connection. Enough time inside your own home, inside your own inner world, inside the life you have actually built, rather than the life you are constantly rushing toward. Today, with the square in full effect, everything that has not been allowed enough space starts pressing for it. And nothing feels small because what is being pressed for is not small. It is the whole of what you have been quietly longing for, and quietly telling yourself you do not need, right now, later, eventually, when things settle. The square is Jupiter's way of informing you that later is not an option, it is willing to accept. The moon today is in its waxing gibbous phase, moving through Virgo. This matters more than it might seem at first greeting, because the moon's sign and phase provide the emotional tone and the specific direction in which all of this square energy is most naturally moving. A waxing gibbous moon is a moon that is almost full but not quite. It is the phase of accumulation, of refinement, of the gathering that precedes the release of a full moon. Energy at this phase has momentum. It is moving toward something, building toward a peak that will arrive in about 12 days with the Aries new moon on April 17th. What you feel today is not a culmination, it is a building. It is the pressure of something that has not yet reached its apex, but is already intense enough to demand your attention. The moon in Virgo adds a particular quality to this building energy. Virgo is the sign of discernment, of practical intelligence, of the ability to look clearly at what is in front of you and distinguish what serves from what does not. The moon in Virgo feels, but it also evaluates. It brings the emotional body into conversation with the analytical mind, and the result is a kind of grounded clarity that is not available in every moon placement. What this means in the context of the Sun square Jupiter is that your emotional experience today, while it may feel large and unwieldy, is also being processed through a Virgo filter that is quietly doing the work of sorting and discerning. You are not just feeling the expansion, you are also, below the level of conscious attention, cataloging it. identifying what within the expansion feels true and generative versus what feels like excess or inflation. The moon in Virgo is your fact-checker for Jupiter's grand pronouncements. This is actually a genuinely useful combination. Jupiter in its purest expression can overstate. It can take what is real and blow it to a scale that becomes abstract or overwhelming. Virgo's moon, in square response to that expansion, is the part of your experience today that is quietly asking, yes, but which part of this is actually real and actionable? Which feelings are telling you something true about your life and which are simply the resonance of Jupiter's amplification? Trust the feelings, but do not discard the Virgo discernment either. Between the two of them, you have access to something quite valuable today, the emotional experience at full volume, and the grounded intelligence to begin understanding what it is telling you. There is also the approaching new moon in Aries to keep in mind. New moons are new beginnings, and a new moon in Aries is the most pure initiation energy the zodiac produces. What gets clarified for you today under this full pressure of the Sun's squared Jupiter is part of what you will be planting as intention in 2 weeks. The discomfort and the revelation of April 5th are seeds. The question they are asking you to hold is, what are you actually ready to begin now that you understand how large the life you actually want really is? Aries, this is your season, and this square is pulling you in 2 directions simultaneously, one that feels natural and one that resists your instincts. The Sun in your sign wants to move, to initiate, to put yourself forward without apology and without delay. And yet Jupiter in Cancer is activating your 4th house of home, family, emotional foundation, and the private interior that you rarely let the world see. The tension today is between the public self that is ready to step forward and the private self that is asking to be acknowledged before you go anywhere. You cannot build a truly new beginning in the outer world if the emotional home you are building it on is shaky or neglected. Today, spend some time with what is happening inside you before you focus on what you want to create outside you. The initiative can wait 1 day. The emotional truth has been waiting much longer. Taurus, you are feeling this square in your 3rd house of communication, mind and daily environment, activated by Jupiter in Cancer, pressing against your 11th house of community and long-term vision. Something about how you have been talking about yourself, how you have been representing your ideas and your capabilities in conversation is no longer matching the scale of what you actually understand yourself to be capable of. You have been underselling something. You may not have done so consciously, but there is a gap between the Taurus you present in daily exchange and the Taurus that Jupiter in Cancer has been quietly expanding in the area of your wider vision and your sense of what community you actually want to belong to. Today, that gap is uncomfortable. It is also an invitation to speak at the size you have actually grown to. Gemini, the Sun squared Jupiter activates your 2nd and 12th houses, bringing the question of value and worth into conversation with everything that lives in the unconscious and behind the scenes. There is a financial or material question present today, but it is rooted in something much deeper than money. It is about what you believe you fundamentally deserve. The 12th house is the house of what is hidden, or what we carry from the past, of the beliefs that operate beneath the level of conscious thought. Jupiter in Cancer has been expanding something in that hidden territory, and the Sun in your 2nd house is shining light on the gap between what lives in the unconscious as belief and what you are actually allowing yourself to have in the material world. The word today is interior, not practical. Understand what you believe before you try to change what you have. Cancer, this is your Jupiter. It is in your sign. And the Sun in Aries squaring it is squaring you. The tension today is the most personal for you of any sign, because the expansion Jupiter has been cultivating in you for nearly a year is now in direct friction with the call of the outer world. The Sun in Aries sits in your 10th house of career, public role, and the version of yourself that the world sees and evaluates. And it is pressing against the emotional and personal expansion that Jupiter in Cancer represents. You have been growing inwardly in significant ways. The question today is whether the external structure of your life, the career, the role, the way others know you, is large enough to hold the person you have become. If not, something needs to shift. The friction you feel today is that recognition arriving with urgency. Leo, the Sun squared Jupiter activates your 9th and 11th houses, which together form the axis of beliefs and belonging. Jupiter in Cancer sits in your 12th house, adding another layer of depth and concealment to this picture. Something in your philosophical framework, in the beliefs and worldviews that govern how you understand your life, is under pressure today. It may be a belief about what kinds of community or friendship you're allowed to want. It may be a conviction about the kind of future you have a right to envision for yourself. Something is too small, and the Sun in your 9th house is the part of you that understands, on a philosophical and intuitive level, that small is not what you were built for. The expansion feels uncomfortable today. Let it. Beliefs that need updating always resist before they release. Virgo, the Moon is in your sign today, which gives you a particular kind of access to your own emotional processing that is not always available. You are feeling and discerning simultaneously, which is your natural gift. But Jupiter in Cancer in your 11th house is expanding something around friendships, community, and the question of where you truly belong. And the Sun in Aries in your 8th house is turning a sharp and honest light on all the hidden dynamics and power structures that you have been navigating quietly. Today, something about a group connection or a friendship comes into clearer focus. You may realize that a community you have been part of no longer fits the person you have become. Or you may recognize that a connection you have been treating as peripheral is actually one of the most significant ones in your life. The Moon in your sign helps you trust what you feel. Use that. Libra, the full moon that peaked earlier this week was in your sign, and you are still metabolizing that light. Now the Sun squares Jupiter from Aries to Cancer, activating your 7th and 10th houses. The relationship territory is still front and center for you, but Jupiter in Cancer is adding the dimension of your public life and career into this relational question. What are the partnerships in your life, both personal and professional, actually supporting? Are they expanding you toward the role and the reputation you are genuinely trying to build, or are some of them holding you in an earlier version of yourself that no longer applies? The discomfort today is the honest answer to that question pressing itself into your awareness. You do not have to act on it today, but do not dismiss what you feel. Scorpio, Jupiter in Cancer sits in your 9th house, and the Sun in Aries occupies your 6th house of daily life, health, and the practical structures of the everyday. The tension of today's square is between the philosophical and spiritual expansion that Jupiter has been cultivating in your beliefs and your worldview, and the very specific and practical reality of how you are spending your actual days. There is a gap, and today it is impossible to ignore. The life you are philosophically ready for and the daily life you are actually living may not match. That mismatch is the pressure. It is not comfortable, but it is clarifying. Something in your daily routine or your work structure needs to change to accommodate the person Jupiter has been helping you become. Today is the day that recognition arrives with enough force to take seriously. Sagittarius, this square activates your 5th and 8th houses in a way that brings the territory of creative self-expression into direct tension with the territory of transformation, shared resources, and everything that operates beneath the surface. Jupiter in Cancer is in your 8th house, which means it has been expanding your capacity for depth, for intimate connection, for the parts of life that require genuine surrender rather than performance. The Sun in Aries in your 5th house is the part of you that wants to create, to play, to express yourself freely and boldly. Today, those two impulses create friction. The creative self-expression you want to move toward requires a depth of authentic feeling that your 8th house is demanding you acknowledge first. You cannot create at the level you are actually capable of while keeping the deeper emotional truths at arm's length. Today's the invitation to let the depth in. Capricorn, Jupiter in Cancer sits in opposition to your Sun sign, and this square with the Sun in Aries creates a particularly complex configuration for you. The 4th and 7th houses are activated, bringing home and relationship into direct dialogue. Jupiter in Cancer, in your 7th house, has been expanding your understanding of what partnership actually means, of what you need from another person in order to feel genuinely met rather than simply accompanied. The Sun in Aries, in your 4th house, is shining light on the home, the private life, the emotional foundation. Today, the question is whether the way you have been living at home, the emotional environment you have created or accepted, is actually supporting the kind of partnership Jupiter is expanding your capacity for. The two are connected. What you build inside the 4 walls of your private life determines what you can genuinely offer outside of them. Aquarius, the Sun square Jupiter activates your 3rd and 6th houses, with Jupiter in Cancer in your 6th. Your daily life and your work routines have been under Jupiter's expansive influence, which sounds practical but is in Cancer's case deeply personal. Jupiter has been expanding something in your daily experience of care, of nourishment, of the rituals and habits that either sustain or deplete the body and the soul. The Sun in Aries in your 3rd house is the communicative, intellectually active part of you that is ready to move quickly and share ideas and engage with the immediate environment. The tension today is between that quick intellectual mobility and the slower, deeper call to actually inhabit your daily life more fully. To let the small, ordinary routines carry the weight of genuine nourishment rather than rushing through them. Today, slow one thing down. The thing you slow down will tell you what has been needing your attention. Pisces, Mars is still in your sign and Mercury is also still in your sign and the North Node is in your sign, and today that Piscean accumulation is in the background while the square between Sun and Jupiter plays out in your 2nd and 5th houses. Jupiter in Cancer in your 5th house has been expanding your capacity for joy, for creative expression, for the particular pleasure of being alive that comes from doing things you genuinely love rather than things you are supposed to love. The Sun in Aries in your 2nd house is asking about value and worth and material reality. Today the friction is this: are you actually investing the resources, including time and energy and attention, into the things that bring you genuine joy? Or are you investing them into things that seem responsible while the creative life you actually long for stays perpetually deferred? Today is not about logistics, it is about honesty. What would your daily life look like if you took the joy as seriously as you take the obligation? There is a way of moving through days like this one that treats the amplification as a problem to be solved. You notice that everything feels louder and heavier and more urgent than usual, and the instinct is to find ways to turn the volume back down, to return to the familiar frequency of managed feeling, of contained desire, of the comfortable certainty that comes from knowing exactly how much of yourself is allowed to show up at any given moment. That instinct is understandable. It has served a real purpose. The apparatus you have built for keeping experience at a tolerable volume is not a malfunction. It is an adaptation. In environments where full feeling was overwhelming or unsafe or simply inconvenient to the people around you, learning to manage the volume was intelligence. It was a form of protection. But today is not an environment that requires that protection. Today is a sky that is deliberately removing it, not to expose you to harm, but to give you the unfiltered signal of your own inner life. And the gift of that signal, however uncomfortable the volume, is that it is accurate. You are not being asked today to feel things that are not real. You are being asked to feel things that are more real than you have been allowing. Jupiter-amplified days have a particular quality that distinguishes them from other intense astrological weather. The intensity is not the chaos of a square to Saturn or the sharp clarity of a Pluto transit. It is the intensity of recognition, of suddenly seeing with clarity and without the usual softening apparatus how large your life actually wants to be, how much you actually long for, how wide the gap is between the life you are living and the life you can feel pressing against the inside of your experience, waiting for permission to exist. That recognition is not comfortable. It is also not something you can unsee once it arrives. And that is ultimately the gift. Jupiter's transits do not leave you where they found you. They change the scale of what you understand to be possible. And once that scale has been adjusted, once you have genuinely seen how large your own life wants to be, the old smallness stops fitting. You cannot go back to wearing it comfortably. The only movement available is forward toward the life that is actually the right size. Nothing in this sky exists in isolation. The Sun squaring Jupiter today is the headline, but Saturn is still in early Aries, still close enough to the Sun to be part of its story. And Saturn has something to say about expansion that is worth understanding clearly, because Saturn's voice in the midst of Jupiter's amplification is not the voice of limitation. It is the voice of honest cost accounting. Saturn in Aries asks a very specific question, not whether you are allowed to want more, not whether the expansion you feel is legitimate, but what are you actually willing to do about it? Saturn is the planet that distinguishes between genuine desire and comfortable fantasy. Fantasy is painless. It costs nothing and requires nothing and leaves everything exactly as it is. Genuine desire, the kind that is rooted in real longing rather than habitual dissatisfaction, arrives with a price tag. It asks for something. It requires change. It demands that you be willing to bear the discomfort of actually moving toward what you want, rather than simply feeling the wanting from a safe distance. Today, with the Sun in Aries pressed between Saturn behind it and Jupiter ahead of it in its square, you are being asked to locate yourself honestly on that spectrum. Is what you are feeling today the amplified recognition of genuine desire that you are willing to pursue? Or is it the inflation of Jupiter making real but manageable dissatisfactions feel more dramatic than they actually are? Both are possible. Both are worth examining. Saturn's proximity to the Sun is the part of the sky that is quietly insisting you do that examination honestly. For most people, the answer will be somewhere in the middle. Some of what feels large today is genuine, pointing toward real-life changes that are genuinely necessary and genuinely worth the cost of making. And some of it is Jupiter's natural tendency to overstate, to make everything feel epochal and transformative, when some of it is simply the ordinary discomfort of a challenging day. The skill of navigating this sky is learning to tell the difference without defaulting to either extreme, neither dismissing everything as Jupiter inflation, nor treating everything as a 5-alarm mandate for immediate upheaval. Saturn in Aries gives you the grounded intelligence to make that distinction. It is the part of today's sky that says, feel everything that is arriving, take it seriously. And then ask yourself, clearly and without dramatics, what specifically is this asking of me, and am I willing to answer? The Mars energy moving through Pisces toward its Aries ingress in the coming days is also building in the background. Mars approaching Aries is a planet approaching its home sign, approaching the place where its drive and energy are most cleanly expressed. As Mars moves toward that ingress, there is a gathering quality to the directional impulse underneath this week's more expansive and emotionally complex energy. Something is about to begin moving, more directly. Something that has been moving through feeling and intuition and underwater currents is going to find more fire and more traction in the days ahead. Today is the preparation for that movement. The Sun square Jupiter is the recognition. What comes next, as Mars completes its journey through Pisces and steps into Aries, is the beginning of action that is rooted in that recognition. Do not waste the clarity of today. Even if you cannot act on it immediately, write it down, speak it out loud. Let it be real enough to have a record of. Because in the days ahead, when the energy to move is more available, you will want to know what April 5th showed you about the actual size of your life and what it is genuinely calling for. April 5th is not a singular event. It is a turning point inside a sequence, and understanding what comes after it helps you understand how to work with what today is offering. Jupiter will remain in Cancer until the end of June, when it enters Leo. These final months of Jupiter in Cancer are the completion of nearly a year of emotional expansion. Whatever seeds Jupiter planted in the territory of home, belonging, feeling, and the question of what you truly need in your interior life, those seeds are now approaching maturity. The square with the Sun today is part of the harvest pressure of this transit. the moment when what has been growing demands to be acknowledged rather than tended in the background. Over the next 2 weeks, the energy builds toward the Aries new moon on April 17th. New moons in Aries are the most potent initiation energy in the zodiac calendar. They are the annual opportunity to begin something at the level of the self, to plant the seed of a new chapter that is specifically personal and specifically aligned with who you actually are, rather than who you have agreed to be for other people. What gets clarified today under the pressure of the Sun square Jupiter is directly relevant to what that new moon asks you to begin. Let today do its clarifying work. Mars entering Aries in the coming days will add fire to fire, increasing the sense that things need to begin, that action is possible, that forward movement is not just desirable, but actually available. The dreamy undercurrent quality of Mars in Pisces will give way to something more decisive and more energetically available. That shift in Mars will feel like the exhale after a long-held breath. In the weeks that follow, Mars will move through Aries and meet both Neptune and Saturn in that sign. These are significant conjunctions that will carry their own distinct energy, but they are ahead. Today, you are being invited to simply understand what today is. It is the day when the skies stop pretending that your life is the size it has been presenting itself as. It is the day when the actual dimensions of what you long for, what you need, what you are genuinely capable of, and what you have been quietly keeping at a manageable volume, arrived at full and undeniable scale. Nothing feels small today, because nothing that is genuinely true about you has ever been small. You have just been working very hard to keep it contained. And today the sky is asking you to consider what would happen if you stopped. The answer to that question is your next chapter, and it is larger than you have been willing to admit. But it is also, when you look at it honestly, exactly the size it should be.